It's your girl, Deja, and the host of Black and Wild, the podcast. This episode will focus on me and telling my uh, journey with hiking and how that turned into me exploring backpacking and kind of where it all began and how it's progressed over time to where I'm at today, and as well as just my goals for continuing with hiking and backpacking. I do want to note that the opinions represented in this episode and on this podcast in general are not representative of any organization or agency. They are solely my opinions and mine alone. So, without further ado, let's get into the episode. I hope that you enjoy this slight detour from the usual content.
I take a break from the usual content, which usually consists of me having conversations with friends of mine who either work or recreate outdoors, and talk a little bit more about my story and experience, specifically with hiking and backpacking and how that has evolved over the years. As I mentioned in the first video where I share about myself, I really got introduced to outdoor recreation, national parks, and the field of conservation and environmentalism through me visiting Yosemite National Park and then working and living there. But what many, I guess, mistakenly assume is, which rightfully so, is that I was an avid hiker when I was in Yosemite, and makes sense because given the environment and the type of work that I was doing and I have done, usually attracts people who are pretty physically active in different ways. And not saying that I wasn't, but hiking definitely wasn't one of the main ways that I exercised, if I could even call it one of the ways that I exercised. So, before, as previously mentioned, before, moving to Yosemite National Park and visiting there for the first time, I noticed that, or when I think back on that time, my family didn't go to national parks. That wasn't even something that was talked about as far as like an option of, where to go for vacation. And so when I first moved there, it was kind of intimidating because you're in this granite bowl with 3,000-foot walls around you, granite walls that literally the only way, if you're going to go hiking, the only way to go is pretty much up. And that was really intimidating. It was also intimidating moving to Yosemite National Park, where people in their free time are getting after it in so many different ways, whether that's hiking, climbing, backpacking, water sports, winter sports, you name it. People were getting after it in any way they could to really enjoy the scenery around them and take advantage of the place that we were living in, whether that was visitors or staff working in the park. And, in the beginning of my time in Yosemite, I will say people were pretty inclusive, especially when it came to rock climbing or bouldering. There would be folks who would offer to take me with them, or offer to allow me to borrow their crash pads or like any gear I wanted, if I wanted to try to like progress and like practice some of those skills, developing them. But hiking is kind of different. You can't teach anyone how to hike because essentially it's just walking, right? It takes time and effort to build that stamina. And I'll be honest, my first summer in Yosemite, it was like adult summer camp for me. Was about to graduate college, and so I was kind of just ready to like let loose and have fun. And going to Yosemite for the purpose of, you know, recreating outdoors and exerting myself wasn't really on the high priority of my list of goals for that summer. However, that summer really did inspire me to want to return and to take advantage of that space in more ways. And so I did go bouldering. I will say that was something I got more into that first summer I was there. But my relationship with hiking has evolved over time. And really, it was started by hearing and seeing what people were up to and wanting to be able to see some of that for myself. There are places oftentimes where pictures will never do it justice. And I wanted to be able to really take myself out and immerse myself in a place that was like completely peaceful, kind of distancing myself from the rest of the world, even more so than you can in Yosemite Valley, and really being able to connect with nature. And so after my first, I'd say like maybe 9 months in Yosemite, so I did spend a winter there after my first summer. And yeah, that first summer I really started to connect with more people who weren't afraid to be patient with me on introducing me on how I could recreate more and like safely, and just kind of have a better idea of what gear I might need. What further inspired that was me working for the interpretation, like, what was it? So essentially, the concessionaire in Yosemite National Park, currently Aramark, um, they have like an interpretation like department or program. And that's where concessionaire staff were giving educational programming to the general public and guided walks, similar to what guided programs you see offered by the National Park Service. But it was offered through the concession and through their staff. So through having that experience and getting the opportunity to learn more about the flora and fauna in the park I was living in and working in, it inspired me to want to really just get out there and immerse myself even more with the place that I've been studying, but don't know personally from like spending my own time out in that place. And so one of the our first like group bonding trip with the staff on the interpretation team, we went backpacking, and I was so excited because I had just met Joe, my now husband. And he, from the moment I met him, he was planning on hiking the PCT. And so, and for those who don't know, that's the Pacific Crest Trail, goes from Mexican border all the way up to the Canadian border, or you can go south and go from the Canadian border to the Mexican border all the way through California. And so he was about to embark on this journey for 6 months. And so I got so excited and inspired by his passion and goals to pursue this opportunity to do this with my coworkers in a safe environment with other people who have way more experience than I do. I was able to borrow trekking poles from my supervisor and, given advice from the different staff on like what backpack to get. I remember going to REI in Fresno and purchasing my first backpacking pack, which was like an Osprey. Can't remember which style, but yeah, I remember, trying to practice and like hiking with weight in my pack, like more weight, and just trying to take myself out more to get used to carrying heavier weight. And I totally made all of the rookie mistakes. As much as everyone tried to help me and give me some guidance, there's only so much people can do. You kind of just, it's one of those things you got to just get out there and see for yourself. So the night before, I think I stayed up until like 3 a.m. Terrible mistake. And first of all, didn't get enough sleep and definitely was not hydrated enough. I also overpacked. That was the other thing. I kept asking for advice on how to pack my pack, but no one can really tell you that, especially because everyone, now I've learned, has different ways of packing their backpacks, whether that's for hiking or doing, an overnight backpacking trip or multi-day trip. And yeah, so I definitely overpacked. My pack was so uncomfortable. Things were like, it was for an overnight trip, which was ridiculous, packed to the brim. I think it was a 60 liter. And I think I brought like 3 books, a journal, just unnecessary things, very unnecessary. The other thing I did wrong too, well, I shouldn't say wrong, but it just didn't work for me and the type of trip I was embarking on, was I didn't bring any of my own food. And so the group essentially who was organizing, the folks on the team who were organizing this trip together for us, they essentially said, like, we're taking requests on what snacks everyone would want, and we're going to buy food to make everyone dinner. And so I just thought, okay, food's taken care of. And I'm someone who thrives on food. I need to have food to survive. And so I couldn't bring any of my own. And my friend and I were a little bit slower. My friend on the team, not that everyone was my friend, but my friend Melissa, who was kind of at a similar ability level I am and knew I was nervous, and I definitely was much slower hiker than the rest of the team that was just way more experienced than I am, especially recreating at that elevation and going into the backcountry of Yosemite National Park. And so she stayed with me, but I was miserable. It was hot and I was tired and I was dehydrated. And I remember getting to camp and just being frustrated because the rest of the team, although I'm pretty sure I gave them the okay, had left us. So they were way ahead of us to the point I couldn't even see them. And I think so far ahead that they couldn't even check on us anymore. And so I was just not the happiest camper, to say the least, when we got to camp. And definitely was wishing I had my own food and that I hadn't packed my pack so heavily, which I thought I needed to do, and bring all these unnecessary things. But it was definitely a lesson learned. And I remember thinking, I don't know if this is for me. I don't know if I want to go backpacking again. Fast forward to moving to Mammoth with my husband and um him saying, let's just go on a trip together. I'm sure if you go with someone that maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable with to express some of your concerns, and if you're having some issues along the way, that you can tell that person comfortably. Not saying this group didn't make me feel comfortable, but it's so different going with your partner versus your colleagues from work. And I remember being so nervous. I had got a new pack because I figured out that the pack I originally bought was way too long for my back. So of course it was digging into my back in ways where it shouldn't be, because in different areas, because it didn't fit me. And so I got a whole different pack by Gregory, and I think it was a Gregory Jade. So I think it was 38, 40 liters. A little bit smaller, but definitely something I wanted to get for day hiking and maybe some overnight trips. I wasn't sure if maybe I would want to get into doing a multi-day backpacking trip. And leading up to that, it was actually, I moved to Mammoth Lakes in 2019, November 2019. And so I spent the winter here, but say that to say, if you remember that year, that was right before COVID hit. And so within 4 months of moving here, COVID struck. And so Joe and I, pretty much all we had to do was to get outside. And, once everything melted out and we were able to explore around our backyard, our home, we did. And I remember thinking, I don't know if hiking's for me. I don't know if I would even try or attempt to backpack again. And one, started to fall in love with being able to know that I can push myself in uncomfortable situations, or, learning that what I think is my limit is actually not, and I can actually push myself beyond that and maybe even a little bit further. And just kind of learning how to check in with myself on like what my needs are, learning of like, okay, if I'm going to be out for a certain amount of time, or I'm doing for a certain distance, these are the kind of things I want in my backpack. Definitely still started out overpacking, and then over time realizing like what was worth the weight of me to carry, and then what was something that I could probably do without. And so that definitely was helpful that summer. And then towards the end of summer, I think it was that September, that's when Joe and I went on our overnight backpacking trip together. Or no, actually it was 2 nights, which is a little ambitious for my first trip. Bless his heart, he did carry the majority of the weight, like the tent and our food and like, all the supplies in order for us to eat, like the Jetboil. And I'll never forget, I was so proud of myself. I was definitely nervous, and don't get me wrong, the weight was tough because I didn't have much experience carrying that much weight. But I'll never forget how proud I was of myself, of like, I can do hard things, and I'm so proud of my body. And having worked up to that point all summer and going on other, day hikes and just pushing the distances, pushing myself in regards to how much elevation gain I could handle, was so empowering. But also getting out and experiencing those views and those places that you can only get to on foot, and that will take a little bit longer than you driving, to a lake and just looking out at it. It was just so amazing. And so we went up to the 20 Lakes Basin, just outside of Yosemite National Park. and started out from Lundy Canyon, if you know where that is. If not, highly recommend going to either place. You don't have to connect the two. And that's a story for another day. I'm connecting the two. But either way, definitely experienced some challenges. I'm not saying it was all easy, and I was exhausted our one full day where we explored around the 20 Lakes Basin that we were camped in. However, it just reignited this interest in me to want to try. And it was just so special to have longer than just a day to spend in that place. And so, yeah, through the years, I've definitely continued to go on longer day hikes. I think my longest day to date was maybe 14 miles. I'm definitely still a slower hiker, and I'm trying to, you know, give myself grace and confidence that, like, it doesn't matter how you're getting after it. It just matters that you're doing it. And I've definitely, learned, like, I got to make sure I've got my food and I'm taking my regular snack breaks. Don't need an obscene amount of water, but how much is enough, and adequate to make sure I have plenty for the adventures that I'm embarking on. The other thing too that made a difference is my partner. He's still the main person I feel comfortable hiking with, and he's super patient. So I would say, if there's anything you're interested in getting involved in, especially when it comes to the outdoors, go with someone who has experience, but also someone who you trust, so you feel comfortable enough to express to them when something's not right for you, right? Whether physically you're not feeling okay, you feel like you're not sure if this is something within, your ability, and having someone that you feel safe to just trial and error with. I was just really thankful for him to answering all of my endless questions. To this day, he still answers my silly questions and is just super patient. But I don't think I would be where I am if I didn't have, like, almost a mentor in him and a guide to help get me to where I am.
Something else that I forgot to add. I do remember something else that deterred me from wanting to get more into hiking at the beginning. And that wasn't just the, tall granite walls and the intimidation of, the elevation and how that would affect me and my breathing. But as far as not affecting me, like, health wise, but just breathing heavy and being comfortable with that and knowing that I'm not going to die, I'm okay. Um, what kind of tainted my experience at the beginning was going hiking with people who weren't always patient with me. And I remember mentioning earlier that, Joe was always really patient and didn't mind, just explaining things to me or slowing down and taking breaks. And what's something else that's intimidated me about wanting to gain new hiking partners is that I don't know if it's a fear of getting left behind, but for me, it's like, what's the point of going out and doing some recreating with someone if we're gonna separate the whole time? It's like, if we're gonna do it together, then let's kind of stay near each other at least. You can go ahead of me, but check back and make sure I'm still there. And that was definitely the part that was tough, is that it seemed like, some of the people I had gone with, especially my first time in Yosemite, were, frustrated about how slow a pace I was going, or, the lack of experience or knowledge that I had. And honestly, I got left pretty frequently. And that's something else that makes me nervous too today, is that people will just leave me. And I think, well, might as well just either go by myself or go with my partner who I enjoy hiking with, and we kind of have our own system down. And so something else I'm learning to work on is pacing myself, you know, knowing my abilities and being confident in them, while also knowing it's okay. It's not, Joe always says, it's not a race. I don't need to be the fastest person to complete a hike or a backpacking trip or cover a certain distance. All that matters is that I'm getting out there and getting after it. But I will say, like, if that's something that's making you nervous, don't be afraid to take that initiative to try things yourself sometimes, or, you know, continue to, like, have those conversations with friends and find people who are your people. Cause I'm someone who loves to stop a lot, and I love to, identify flowers or look at a bird, or, smell a tree or hug a tree. And there are definitely those people who totally respect it, but they're definitely trying to get out there and get after it. And that's great for some people, but that's not what brings me joy when I get outside. So yeah. And so it brings me to the main point I wanted to get to is I wanted to highlight our most recent backpacking trip that we went on, which was my longest backpacking trip to date and probably the heaviest pack that I have carried thus far. Still definitely kicked my butt. Not gonna lie, I'm not gonna say it was easy, but it was definitely one of the most magical experiences I have had thus far. And so back in, it was Labor Day weekend, this earlier this summer, and we wanted to go on one last big backpacking trip, and knowing it was probably going to be our last one of at least this season, especially before we got married, and knew we were going to go jumping straight into a month out from the wedding, straight into just wedding craziness for those last few weeks leading up to the day, and got a permit to go out. Why am I blanking on the name right now? Oh my gosh, I totally blanked on where we went. Anyways, okay, so yeah, we got a permit to do and this was for Labor Day weekend, to do 3 nights, 4 days at Vogelsang or near Vogelsang. And we ended up going up, and it was quite a long hike to get in. It's pretty monotonous, and that was definitely killing me. I ended up carrying more food this time other than just my snacks, which usually Joe carries all the food, but because we were bringing food for 4 days, we needed to distribute the weight. And so I definitely did take on more, and helping carry the supplies that we needed. And of course I had to bring my own gear, like my sleeping bag, my clothes, and my sleeping pad and my pillow and my toiletries, things of that sort. And it was tough. I think I had to take a break like every hour for sure. I just could not adjust to the weight. And I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? We ended up camping at Booth Lake and deciding to stay there for the rest of our trip. And it was just so amazing, being able to know that we had so much time there, and then just set up camp in one place and had time to just explore the area. I definitely cried a few times, had so many moments of introspection and being able to process things that were going on in my life at the time, and just kind of having that time to slow down and be together as a couple. Our last big trip together as, engaged before we embarked on the biggest adventure of our lives together, one of them. And I remember just feeling so spoiled, thinking, oh my goodness, I just feel like I'm so rich in the ways that aren't tangible. And pinching myself, or wanting to pinch myself, thinking, how is this something it's essentially free? Of course, you have to pay for the gear and get yourself out there. But once you're there, like, no one is stopping you from being able to experience the beauty and appreciate the time that you're having out there. And I'm just so thankful for that time. I will say, as being a Black woman hiking outdoors, I didn't see much representation. I think because we're in California and our proximity to some of the major cities here, but I did see some other people of color. And there were definitely some other women, but quite a bit of times it was white cis hetero males. And yeah, people who definitely had shared, along the way, you kind of piggyback with people a little bit, or like leapfrog. So you kind of see folks at different times, or pass by people who are camping near you and sharing, oh, we go on this group backpacking trip every year, or, I've done this my whole life. I was really excited to see there was a young family, and it was a Black man with his wife or partner, and she also appeared to be BIPOC, and they had their baby with them. And I thought, how special is that, and really cool. We definitely had a moment where it was like, I see you, see me, see you kind of thing. And so I definitely saw a few people who appeared to be BIPOC as well, like Asian descent. And yeah, I'd love to see more representation. And I did feel welcome in that space. I didn't feel like I wasn't supposed to be there. But it definitely is somewhere that I would love to
just, introduce that option to other individuals if that's something they want to explore and be able to push their own boundaries. And I'm so thankful to have had that experience. And I remember leaving and thinking, okay, I definitely could do this again. And every time I think I've reached my limit of, okay, I think that's the longest trip I want to go on, like backpacking wise, or like, through hike, or the longest day hike, or biggest day hike, or the biggest mileage, or, elevation gain that I want to do, or that I think I can do. Every time I think I reach that limit, I realize I can probably go a little bit further, or I'm interested in seeing what's on the other side of that. And that trip definitely solidified that for me. So yeah, without further ado, I'll also start to share some information about how you can view videos of vlog that I created while we were on that trip together, or Joe and I were. And I have some pictures that will go along. But if you want to check out, what headspace I was in, and more specifics of the reflections that I had during that trip, you want to see somebody else that, is not the norm of who you typically see out in these spaces on a backpacking trip, definitely recommend checking it out. It's pretty funny. There's some silly moments where I have some cameos by different animals, and just some really cool moments of reflection that I have during those videos. And then you can see also a little bit more, if you've never been in that area, about what that area looked like. And yeah, I hope that this was inspiring for you. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to share more about just what my journey has been like. But yeah, hiking has given me so much. And I always joke with people and say, I like only hike and ski for the views, because part of it is what makes it so great is what you get to see and experience around you. And it does feel good to, push my body, know what limits my body has, or maybe what I think that they have, and knowing that I can do so much more, and being just so proud and thankful of like the physical abilities that I have that can take me to these amazing places, and knowing that I have that drive in me to accomplish what I maybe once thought was unachievable. So yeah, here's to more representation, more diversity in outdoor spaces and in general. And yeah, I hope that you enjoy the companion video that I will share on my YouTube channel if you want to check that out. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in, and until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Black and Wild. I hope that you enjoyed this diversion from the usual content, and that there's some part of my story that you feel connected to, or even inspired to try something new yourself and take some risks of, exploring maybe situations or places, activities that maybe make you feel a little uncomfortable, but you're curious about. I do want to note that there'll be more episodes like this to come, where I reflect on my personal experience in outdoor spaces and in the field of conservation, environmentalism, and, some perspectives that I've gained through this time. I am planning on posting episodes on a more regular basis, so expect to see episodes bi-weekly from here on out. And if you have any ideas of content that you would like to hear about or see, stories that I haven't touched on yet that you also think are missing in regards to, representation in the outdoors, please feel free to reach out. You can follow the email address in the description below, or you can find me on Instagram, and the podcast has its own Instagram channel. So you can always send me a direct message on there. But thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to chatting at you next time. Take care.